Oh.
And we are live. You know how we do. Foundry After Dark. Who's here? Who's got something to say tonight? We have a few special guests. Well, at least we have a very special guest. Maybe we'll start with introducing him. We're joined tonight by Sam Ramsey.
I thought you were going to say Benjamin Black from a nuclear submarine.
Now,
I was very, very pleased with the outcome of that one right there.
Ben's just one of this gang.
Yeah,
Ben was on last week as the Easter egg. He was the total Easter egg of After Dark last week.
Yeah, up, down, left, right, BA, and then I appeared.
Killing blow.
Yeah.
We forgot select start.
It was nice because he was hidden in shadow for most of the session, too.
As he may be today.
There's a little more light on me today.
I didn't know they let you use flashlights inside nuclear submarines, Ben.
That's actually just lit by the nuclear glow.
Oh, right, you're by the reactor. Awesome.
Yeah, this is actually Cherenkov radiation.
Oh, dear. Well, that is a fairly
it doesn't look as blue as I'd expect.
I know, I was, damn it, you just can't get away with anything with this crowd.
All right, so Sam, you have a new job. Why don't you tell us about it?
Well, so the first thing to say is that it's the best job I ever had in my life. The second job is the second comment is probably something along the lines of muahaha. All of you. No, it's good. It's good. I can't believe the things that are happening, the changes that are alive, how many people are talking about Cloud Foundry, all the different problems that we're solving, and I got to go on stage a couple times at IBM's Interconnect event last week, and one of the points that I kept making was how vibrant this group is, right? That people aren't demonstrating sort of, oh, I built this one way a couple of years ago, and the architecture is not going to change. Sort of the aliveness of the re-architecture, the progress on Diego, the auctioning system, the progress towards Lattice, all those things just give me a really, really good sense that people aren't being precious about it, that they're getting commitment towards getting the project to do what it needs to do in the cloud. And there's so much more opportunity, right? You talk, oh, there we go. Representing.
I'm just having a little drink, Sam. Just offering it to anyone else who wanted it. Don't let me interrupt.
Little Ridge Zinfandel here, so I could offer you, I suppose, some of my chocolate-covered almonds.
It is the night before Monday, after all.
That's not a school night, right?
So Sam, speaking of Interconnect, I noticed that they had done some Bluemix sessions, but they also seemed to have like a dedicated Cloud Foundry session. And it seemed like, at least on following it afar from Twitter, that a lot of people showed up for that. Is that accurate? Or I couldn't.
Yeah, the room was packed. The people were asking a lot of questions. One of the things about Interconnect that's interesting is it's mostly a customer conference. So there are like 21,000 people there, and probably 17,000 of them are CIOs, architects, IT managers from different IBM customers around the world. They were all over the sessions. We had hundreds. We had actually probably over. I know that just in the two sessions that I presented directly, we had well over 1,500 people attend. So clearly they were pretty stoked. Asked some really smart questions. And Christopher Ferris, who's our board member for the Cloud Foundry Foundation and is the CTO of Open Cloud at IBM, was very enthusiastic. Just the momentum was solid. One of the most interesting things about the conference was in the very opening keynote, Robert LeBlanc, who is basically the head of software at IBM, and technically he's the SVP of cloud, which is kind of like basically all of where software is going for IBM. They just announced that they're committing to spending $4 billion on cloud infrastructure, and they have committed themselves to generate $40 billion in revenue by 2018. So basically that gets hung around Robert LeBlanc's neck. Within 3 minutes of opening his keynote to these 21,000 people, he's like, so what is Bluemix? It's Cloud Foundry, it's OpenStack, it's Docker, and it's Node.js. And these are the four core open technologies that we're basically betting IBM's cloud on. I thought that was kind of cool.
Okay.
Non-compete don't apply in California. You guys are clearly smarter than I am about your tags.
We do what we can over here. So what's the thing that you see the Cloud Foundry Foundation trying to accomplish in the next 6 months?
Andrew, you're on mute.
I'm on mute?
I can hear him fine. No,
Yeah,
you're good.
I heard him.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot. We've got the Cloud Foundry Summit to kick off, so hopefully everybody here knows that the Cloud Foundry Summit is May 11th and 12th in Santa Clara. We're kicking around the idea of Cloud Foundry Europe. That was one of the things that came up in a lot of conversations also at Interconnect. That would probably be late September. One of the things that I got a chance to sit down with Jonathan Bryce and the head of marketing from OpenStack. One of the things that they pointed out, which I was pretty interested in, was the OpenStack summits. They have combined both attendees who are just interested in learning with a design summit for OpenStack. So getting your core developers together, deciding what direction are their projects going on, getting feedback from the community. That'd be a very interesting thing to do for the CF summit, I think. We certainly have enough tickets set aside to.
We can have this either here or later.
Wanted to come to that.
I'm not a big fan of the way that the OpenStack Summit is orchestrated and architected. We can either have that here or we could talk about that later, but I think there's a bunch of reasons why we shouldn't do that.
You don't think a design summit's a good thing, a good idea in person?
I think if you just look at the quality of the projects coming out of the OpenStack collectively, then that's a pretty good argument against the way they do things.
Is that the forum where they decide what they're going to tell Amazon to do?
If anyone doesn't know the reference to that, that is a quote from Chris Kemp, who sat at this very table with me. He's a great guy playing chess with me and Josh McKenty. And Chris is known for his hyperbolic rhetorical style. And he said Amazon is going to start coming to the design summits and listening to what we're doing to get their roadmap. So that
actually, more specifically, in his keynote at an OpenStack summit, he said, "Soon we'll be telling Amazon what to do."
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That was 3 years ago.
I saw it.
So by now they're dictating to Amazon,
It was
right?
in San Diego.
CloudStack, whichever stupid stack. I just lose track right now. OpenStack. That's what it was. OpenStack.
I mean, honestly, it would make our life a lot easier if OpenStack was amazing as an infrastructure as a service. And
you know what? My guess is that if you apply enough thrust in terms of money and smart people, it can be a functional service. The problem, of course, is that almost nobody can do that, and so you have a lot more people trying to deploy OpenStack than are actually equipped to.
Well, you have to decide. You have to commit to feeding it with human blood.
Hey, this is not OpenStack After Dark, gentlemen.
All right, sorry.
I was going to say, I thought we were talking about Cloud Foundry.
Hey, I noticed that there are a lot of our customers who are interested in running Cloud Foundry on OpenStack.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Emphasis on running Cloud Foundry. And I want them to be as successful as possible. And so it would be nice if there were a stack on which they could get up and running quickly and easily.
One of the things that I'd like to see happen, and I'm motivated to help whatever level within Cloud Foundry, within Pivotal, is because if you get this layer that's running across all these different infrastructures, and you actually start to capture the metrics of what's happening from an operational perspective with the Bosch layer, then you should be able to share those metrics, and then you can have insight into what is the actual benefit operationally to whatever you're going to run on top of, and expose. Because right now it's kind of a mystery. Like, how do you compare apples to apples across all these different infrastructures? And I think Cloud Foundry might be in a unique position to try to expose some of those metrics.
Sure. So like right now, the health monitor is that component in the Bosch layer that understands like how often things fail at the infrastructure layer, and we haven't really set it up to do reporting and analytics, but that would be an interesting project. I bet like if you just if we did a little bit of product definition on, hey, what are some key questions we'd want answers to that would be common across cloud, whether it's like how often does a VM fail, how often does a disk fail to attach, how often does an IP address fail to attach, like these common kind of infrastructure things that you just start expecting to work that probably have different characteristics across the cloud, then we could characterize it more specifically.
It'd be interesting to have a Cloud Foundry index of infrastructure.
Man, I was just about to say it. It's just
Sorry.
on the tip of my tongue. No, it's good.
No, Ben.
You're faster than me. I'm perfectly happy to say have everyone else say the
When
smart thing
you
first.
say index, Sam, are you talking about like how many deployments are on a particular infrastructure, that kind of thing, or what do you mean?
Yeah, not just how many deployments are on infrastructure, because that's something that we're doing. So just I'll slowly answer Andrew's question sort of bit by bit. What do we have to get done in the next 6 months? A lot. One is taking a global attitudes and perception survey, finding out where all the Cloud Foundry installations are, where people are in their adoption cycle, all that stuff. But if Cloud Foundry could opt into some anonymized index performance, then as the platform that's sitting on top of different infrastructure APIs and different infrastructure implementations, we could offer a canonical perspective on how good your underlying performance is, and that's something that's very, very difficult to do in general if you're going to do like cross-cloud comparisons.
And when we say underlying performance, what we're saying is an index that reports on the actual performance of applications on a given infrastructure provider, right? So we've made everything common, right? It's apples to apples in terms of the app platform itself, right? It's all Cloud Foundry. But now you're putting it on these different infrastructures, whether it's AWS, whether it's Google Cloud, whomever it might be. And in fact, this is a great way to have people compare the performance that they can expect from their on-prem stuff if they want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So they can actually say, apples to apples, what is the quality of service that I'm experiencing on any of these different infrastructures?
This is what I want.
One thing that's been fascinating to us is we've been I don't know if you guys have been following some of the Amazon instance types, or they're evolving them quite frequently actually right now. And we've been running on M1s since we've been running on Amazon for quite a while on our production cloud. And they're sometimes we are unable to get the M1s that we want. They've been encouraging us to move to M3s. And we've noticed that the M3s are nowhere near as performant on certain characteristics, or like networking performance. In particular, we've noticed. So even within you would need more detail than I'm running on Amazon, for example. You'd have to probably characterize a little bit about how the instance types are allocated across your deployment to make whether you use provisioned IOPS and other interesting stuff.
Bear's got this. Bear's got the bit between his teeth. Problem is solved.
Mm-hmm.
So this is stories that used to be swapped around when people were, building out and doing this stuff. But maybe there's a way to take advantage of some of this inside the platform, and that is that. So there's these guys that do renderings, and they will bring up large fleets of Amazon instances, and they'll do whatever, like thousands at a time, and they'll run a battery at the beginning to benchmark the instances. And then
they'll kill the ones that suck.
Well, they'll kill the ones that are terrible. They'll discard. But the ones that are good, like really good, they'll actually pull them out of that and to put them into like their permanent instances. Right. So they can and maybe like across a wide deployment of Cloud Foundry, you can start to look for ways to arbitrage the underlying infrastructure.
Yep.
So that's a great business model. Thanks. I quit.
New Wired article update. Days.
He made it a week. He made it through 1 week.
Yes. So Sam, oh yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to say Andrew gets to be my technical co-founder.
Seeking technical.
Let's go. All right, who wants to fund this?
EMC Ventures is in this, right?
Mm-hmm. Dan Doctor.
Yeah. Spin it all out.
So Sam, what else did you? The other thing that's going on is we're organizing the summit that's coming up, and I think it's been pretty cool that there's been a pretty steady stream of Pivotal CF customers coming in to speak, right? Like you've seen that stream. It's after dark, so we can talk about them.
I think I have a backlog of about 20 emails.
I feel like all I do is just forward add Sam Ramji to people asking to speak at Summit.
Actually, I'm hiring somebody just to take James Waters' inbound email.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Don't apologize for a second. It's awesome.
Welcome to the club.
The enthusiasm is very high. It's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I think we know customer stories are going to be our stock and trade, for everything that we do for the foundation. I think that's probably consistent with how you've looked at stuff. But I always felt like, truth is only found in the market. You can lie with Excel, you can lie with white papers, but when you have customers who are on stage talking about what they've done and taking questions, then you know if you've got a technology that really works and that you care about. So that's pretty much crucial. We're also launching a set of working groups. This is going to take a little bit of time, and James, you know about this, but a bunch of the Cloud Foundry users have said, if you're doing industrial internet, for example, what would it take to make Cloud Foundry a phenomenal platform for industrial internet applications? If you're doing fintech or fin services, what does it take? What are the modifications you need to make, and who are the other people that you can talk to say, I'm running high transaction volume applications or financials analytics applications on CF. How can they share their ideas? So that's a pretty critical area for us too.
And drive roadmap.
And drive roadmap. One of the interesting things that's come up in the last 2 weeks, there's sort of this general consensus that as you get your experimental workloads out, right? You get an app out and you put it out on Amazon and you're running it on small or medium instances or whatever. The price point's real low. It's costing you $10 a month, $100 a month, and your cost curve is basically linear. As you get to the point where you're doing $1,000 a month, $10,000 a month, you're like, well, this means that my service is doing well. At the point that it starts hitting your bottom line, then you start saying, well, can I boomerang that application workload? The stuff that I was experimenting on that I still want to grow, I'll leave that in a public cloud, but then I want to start getting more control of these things that are generating enormous workloads. So these were large size chunks. How do I pull those back? And one of the conversations about that boomerang phenomenon obviously is about Cloud Foundry as a basis for app interoperability and portability. The other component, though, is what's the full scope of portability? So the conversations around SLAs. If I know that I depend on a Redis service or I depend on a Mongo service or whatever, can Cloud Foundry articulate within the project what's the basic SLA for the guaranteed set of Cloud Foundry capabilities that I get in anybody's implementation of Cloud Foundry? Yeah, providers can, go above those SLAs. They can add additional services, right, through the CPI or through whatever. But can you get a core catalog of services that not only exist but have a particular SLA? That's a good conversation for this group, and I think something that I'm going to continue to pay attention to over the next couple months as we try to gin up, where's the CFF?
It's actually a really important thing to mention. Pivotal is the company that contributes the most data services to Cloud Foundry. So there's the Cloud Foundry core with Elastic Runtime, Services API, Cloud Controller, there's Bosch. And Pivotal is open source, the MySQL HA service, a Redis service, a RabbitMQ HA service. IBM has never contributed, to my knowledge, a single one of their data services to Cloud Foundry. And that's important because if you don't have these open source multi-cloud data services in your mix, then you're sort of tempting propriety at hello. You're like, hey, welcome to DB2 plus Elastic Runtime. And then, hey, where's my cloud portability? I haven't seen an open source DB2 service out there yet. So I think that's something that we should be pushing on the ecosystem on is that, Elastic Runtime is not just here as a free calling card. Like, they need to participate in the portable data services part of this scenario as well.
So
there's going to be a core set of services that we need to be able to say, here are the 5 or the 8 or the 12 or whatever. I don't want to be like, Moses and have the 15, 10 commandments. But we should articulate a core set of those, as required for portability, and it's not just enough to have the set articulated, but what's your SLA? What's the responsiveness?
So let's talk about the SLA aspect. So you're talking about kind of capturing the dependency of an application on underlying services.
Yep.
And it's one thing to say, whatever that is, some database, But then what would the SLA mean, and how would you actually establish that?
So I think it's going to depend on a service-by-service basis, right? One would be, what throughput can I expect? What responsiveness can I expect? What level of reliability can I expect? Those are going to be more challenging, particularly reliability.
So let me suggest that that doesn't actually work.
All right.
There are two answers. It's either best effort, in which case it's totally unquantified,
Random.
or it is committed. Those are your only options.
Okay. Say more about that.
Right. So I think the best example is committed IOPS on AWS. That's the easiest one to talk about. If you don't have committed IOPS, what's the SLA? Right. There's no meaningful SLA.
Because of what we were talking about a minute ago.
Exactly.
If you have a noisy neighbor, then what you're getting from your underlying infrastructure is going to change the SLA or change the performance of your data source.
This is why I'm fascinated with where Linux containers are going to go, because right now your CPU shares, you can allocate, you get fair share of a CPU depending on how many containers you schedule, theoretically. But the other components, like bandwidth and IOPS to disk, IOPS on your network, those aren't represented as fair share, right? So you could put, like, as far as I know, maybe Ben and Andrew might correct me here, but I think if you could have more things that were provisioned, so you have your minimum threshold that you'll get, and then if the rest of the stuff is idle, that you get the rest of the disk IOPS, or you get the rest of the network bandwidth. That would be awesome. But CPUs.
You're exactly right. You're exactly right, and it's really every resource that is being consumed ultimately falls into this model where it's either best effort, in which case you get what you get, or you are paying to get committed allocations of it. And the bursting that you're talking about is another interesting aspect of it. And people may do different things there. They may say you can burst to 100% available. You can't burst at all, or they'll give you some allocation of the available capacity to burst into because the switching cost is too high when they want to reallocate it to someone else. So they don't want to essentially give up all of it, right? So there are a lot of interesting models there, and I think that is totally unexplored in terms of how the deployment packages are being defined, right? If we're looking at the container world, those things are generally defined in terms of what's got to be in the image and what the capabilities are that are expected of the host that's running them. And
I should. There is a presentation from one of the Kubernetes guys that was talking about how their original motivation at Google for let me containerize that for you, and the stuff inside of Google that had predated that was mainly about just this topic. They didn't come up. They trust their workloads. At Google, they don't, as far as like security isolation is not as important. What they were really concerned with was performance isolation.
Right, resource isolation.
Yeah, resource isolation. And they had a very nice visual of that. I'll try and dig up the presentation. It was one of the guys that is, I don't know if he works on Kubernetes full time, but it was for me it was kind of eye opening. And then I thought it was an interesting. He's like, yeah, at Google we really care about performance. And then we did this Kubernetes thing, and Docker doesn't have all this stuff that we care about, but we went with it anyway. So it was interesting.
Funny you should say that. So I was going through a bunch of the app container spec stuff this very day, and the isolators, which is what that stuff falls under, there was a first cut at it, and immediately the Google folks jumped in and said, please don't reinvent this. We went through years of pain to learn a good model. It's entirely encoded in let me container that for you. Please just steal it. And I think little by little that's actually what's happening. Right now they're looking at really basic stuff, sort of what does set our limit allow me to do. But over time I think they're going to get more sophisticated in that, right? Because our limit doesn't really accommodate things like application-specific network or I/O resource allocation.
And no one really knows what's behind the veil at Google, but you can imagine if you get to the point where you can kind of have some qualitative understanding of what these workloads look like, that your schedulers could take in, put things that are I/O heavy with things that are compute heavy, and like your scheduling and packing algorithms get really sophisticated.
That's right, and I'm going to turn that back around and get all narcissistic about it, in the corporate narcissism sort of way, and say that that's one of the great things about being on an open common platform, is that those sorts of innovations in scheduling and resource allocation to really optimize things, whether it's for performance or efficiency, once they get sort of discovered by the behavior in any one corner of that community, they rapidly spread everywhere. So whereas that's actually sort of the downside of all the lock-in style plays, is that you get what you get, and in the more open forums, you can actually see those optimizations everywhere. So that was my pitch. Buy my product.
Hey James, who owns your availability?
I just, whenever SLAs come up and Ben is around, I think of all those old blog posts where someone would be talking about cloud SLAs, and it was different than resource commitment, which is what you guys were just talking about, or resource share. But
You're talking about contractual SLAs.
yeah, like, hey,
insurance policies.
people used to always be like, I'm going to compete with an enterprise cloud that has a better SLA, and he would just notoriously tweet them this website where there's some sort of, I think it's like it asks you who owns your availability, and then you click and it says you.
Yeah. It's you. That wasn't my site. Someone much smarter than me came up with that. I think that might be Hodges, but
it's pretty good. Pretty good. I just think, though, the guys, like, this is all like really interesting moonshot stuff, but like people today, like, they don't even imagine this world because they're still even dealing with the basics, right? Like, they think Amazon is a singular solution. They think that the VMware stack and their private data center is its own solution. They think OpenStack is its own path, and they often see them as very divergent, different paths. And I think the one thing that I never really loved about the OpenStack community was how much OpenStack proprietary things they wanted to make, as opposed to making cloud portable things. It's like, well, you need the OpenStack way of thinking about this and the OpenStack way of thinking about that. Same as Amazon and VMware, right? It's sort of the vertically integrated play. So I think that's still the world that we largely live in. And even basic portability, where you can move a project slowly between things, is pretty appealing to people, let alone kind of, from an algorithm on the specification you want.
I mean,
yeah, people go crazy for portability, right? In terms of the idea of being able to get things from private to public, from public to private, being able to take advantage of portable apps. One of the things that not that many people have talked about with Cloud Foundry is, the highest and best use long term might not be custom solutions, which is mostly what people are building on today, but the next version of Sugar CRM, the next version of Documentum, the next version of Amdocs, right? Why shouldn't it be a tile that you click and install? Now that might seem trivializing for complex enterprise apps, but as a orienting vision, the idea that there's a large, tens of thousands of ISVs ecosystem building Cloud Foundry apps, portability is what creates efficient markets for technology. So I think that's one of the things that came back certainly from the IBM conference. Their customers were just bananas for the idea that you'd be able to move your apps around, including the apps that you'd purchased.
Yeah, I spent this week in EBC with a major, like, this is not some trivial app. It's actually an industrial company that creates the equivalent of Salesforce.com, but for, say, you want to make an airplane from scratch, like every bolt you need, how the assembly line works, like major industrial automation software. And they pretty much committed to me. They're like, we're moving this to Cloud Foundry because we impose so much pain on our customers now once they get it, of running it and updating it and scaling it.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, we're doing this. And I think that'll be a massive second wave that will hit and cause, I think that's the sort of, like, you got your first, like, we get our iMac out, and then that's sort of like the iPod moment for us.
Yeah, once you can publish a registry of the Global 2000 companies that have Cloud Foundry deployed, then you end up with this, you're throwing this bow wave, and to continue the bow wave analogy, right? All the dolphins, right? All the companies that would like to provide apps in that environment, they'll start leaping off of it, right? It'll make it much more efficient for them.
Well, I honestly think it's going to drive their own support costs down. Once you have this fabric that you can deploy into with all the operational benefits of a platform, and you know, some of them might have a little work to port into something like Cloud Foundry, but it's better than, you know, whatever everyone's doing, kind of a random deployment of their thing, and then they got to support it.
Yeah, and the big shift that at least I'm seeing is an year and a half before we'd speak to a lot of clients, and they would be like, hey, I'm going to put my tier 2, tier 3 apps on Cloud Foundry, right? A year and a half back. Middle of last year, you know, it's been like, I want to look at Cloud Foundry for all my tier 1 apps. And late last year and early this year is once they've seen the shift from tier 2 to tier 1, they're looking at the other ISVs sitting in their stack saying, this is archaic. I want this on CF. We've seen that evolution of CF as being the front and center for pretty much all apps, not just homegrown custom apps, but really packaged apps. And the pressure is on the ISVs to actually deliver that experience that CF is delivering on the regular apps also for them. So,
I had a great call. We talked last week about, or 2 weeks ago, about how I was in Florida to see City. And one of the things that one of the CTOs of the city asked me to do was to get Tibco very aligned with us. And I had a great call with Matt Quinn, who's the CTO of Tibco, this week. And Sam, I'd like to introduce him to you, but he was like, hey, he's down in Palo Alto. He's like, guys, you know, we're not committed yet, but I'm looking really hard at how do we get more and more of our whole suite to run in a Cloud Foundry native way. We've always been a distributed systems company, really. That's always been what we're into. So I think we got SaaS that presented last year at the summit. We got SAP presented. I think we're a year away from this being obvious, but it's going to be interesting to get those first couple folks.
So on that note, what I did at the end of the week was I ended up talking with some people that are maybe a little more conservative, and they had some preconceived notions, or maybe it wasn't articulated very well, but they were choked up on some idea about DNS and the idea that you'd have a wildcard DNS entry. Although on further investigation, it seemed like the main thing was they thought Cloud Foundry was trying to run DNS, and so then like everything grinds to a halt because you have to stop and kind of explain this side issue that they think's a security thing, and you're often dealing with someone who's kind of 2 layers below someone who made a checklist that has like, oh, you got to have this thing and this thing and this thing. But it's not really a conversation where they're evaluating the truth. So that's
let's be clear, Andrew. You were talking to a federal team, a federally oriented set of folks, and the one place where Red Hat is very active is in federal, and there's all kinds of CF FUD there. So
maybe I should, since you brought it up, I got this question from a financial services customer the other day that had a similar compliance checklist kind of thing about not using wildcard. And let me be very clear, you don't need a wildcard DNS to use Cloud Foundry. It's a convenience. So what most developers want to do is they want to onboard their app onto the platform, and if you use a wildcard DNS entry, and let's say it's, we'd recommend something like yourlab.yourcompany.com or something like that. They could get a DNS entry that would be based off of yourlab.yourcompany.com. But that's not required. So we have a set of, let's say, 10 to 15, I can't remember the exact number, of static host names that you would have to register. And then if you onboarded a new app and you wanted to put a new domain, you would just need to have a workflow to where whoever is in control of your DNS creates the new DNS record for that and points it at the Cloud Foundry routers. So probably that would be like, go to your F5 team, for example, or go to your whoever manages your ELB if you're using Amazon, and create the new domain and then point it at the Cloud Foundry routers, and you're good to go. So it's not a requirement. It's definitely just a convenience. But unwinding that from people's perception was that people were surprised that or like there's a little bit of FUD out there that it's a required thing. It's not.
For your real apps, you're probably going to have a custom route for that app anyway, and then for anything that we're talking about, it's more about the internal development cycle and being able to spin things up on a URL that you can check and this kind of stuff. So, I mean, it's easily worked around if that's a requirement, but it was kind of interesting for someone that's more. I've been more in the kind of the web startup side of this stuff, watching these guys kind of trip and fall on was just what I consider it like a trivial detail.
So I had a really popular, somewhat controversial comment offered on Twitter this morning, and I owe a blog about it, which is, we talk about portability, but one of the foundations of the portability in Cloud Foundry is that there's an embedded OS inside of it, right? So it's not an orchestration system that takes whatever OS you've installed and then tries to make the same system whole again. It actually brings its OS and builds the infrastructure itself from whole. And I'm still surprised by how many people don't realize that once they use CF, they're getting a platform that's been CI'd on a very particular OS that we control, that we security patch, etc. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge mind-blowing conversation for CIOs because you say, like, hey, what business value to get out of managing all these different OSs you have today? Zero.
Yeah.
So
operating systems are irrelevant. It's just going to take a while for everyone to get that.
To me, promises of portability are only as interesting as the disciplines behind them. Like, what is the actual discipline that you bring that gives you the portability? That's the interesting claim. And I think that's the interesting part of the narrative to some extent.
Yeah, the large-scale patching challenge is huge, right? How do you patch a fleet of applications running on a fleet of servers with a range of operating systems? It ends up being, in many ways, NP complete if you don't design it, if you don't engineer it very particularly for manageability, right? And one of the challenges we will certainly have in scaling out CF across a very large set of providers is to provide a consistent way that CVEs get handled, a particular status for certification across a time window, right? What does it mean to be certified? How do we make sure that that providers are providing the right security updates at the right time to keep their customers, application developers, others safe? And what stance are we going to take, and how aggressive will we be on saying, well, you haven't responded to these last 3 vulnerabilities, it's been 3 weeks, you're going to be decertified, and we're going to make this public? Or, do we rule with, with chocolate and wine rather than cold metal, and say, we're going to make it easy for you to make sure that you're up to security compatibility as part of your ongoing cert. Just basically, in a nutshell, certifying services is a lot harder than certifying distributions.
Yeah, I mean, Bear, you deal with our CVE process today. I mean, should any of that be part of the foundation? Should that be a shared concern? You think that's Pivotal specific?
No, I can tell you we don't think of it as Pivotal specific in any way when these things come up. I realize you'll see it on the lists on the main mailing list for both Bosch and for VCAP Dev for Cloud Foundry that we get asked almost immediately when the trendy, funny named security vulnerabilities come out, like whether it's Heartbleed or Ghost or something. And our goal is to turn it around within 48 hours. And we did a really nice job on Ghost. We turned it around really fast, but we take it seriously. Like what you talked about in you're talking about the operating system. So let's just talk about Ghost. What we had to do, right? So we had to update the Bosch dumb cell, which is the base operating system, and then in each container that runs in the platform in Cloud Foundry, if it goes through a build pack, we take the middleware configuration like Tomcat or Java or let's say Ruby, if you're in that world, and then we mirror that up with a container file system image, and so we also had to patch that as well. And so by the time we released both the Bosch stem cell and runtime, which was within about 48 to 72 hours with Ghost, people that applied that patch to their systems, none of their applications had to be updated themselves directly. Just by doing a rolling deploy of Cloud Foundry, they were patched for Ghost. They didn't have to contact the developers and say, push a new copy of your app, and I'm going to have to check these 1,000 apps. They just now there was a couple edge cases there. If someone did a static compilation of something and put that in their their app, then that didn't account for that. But we checked all the build packs, and none of the build did that by default. So someone would have to have done something strange. And when we did that, and it was just so gratifying. Like you could say, wow, these thousands of applications running on our production system were just patched without any of the developers having to do anything. And that was really cool.
That is phenomenal. I mean, that is like millions of dollars that got saved right there. The thing that makes me, this is super nerdy, right? This is totally, economics nerdy. The thing that makes me most excited about Cloud Foundry is thinking about literally billions of dollars of efficiencies that we're going to generate just over the next couple of years. Because that efficiency means that people make money, they get their kid through college, they pay their mortgages, things just work at a fundamental level. And these are really, really amazingly hard problems to solve.
Operational competitive advantages. Right, that's what it's about.
It's hard stuff.
Yeah, and the irony is, sorry, James.
Arnie, man, go. I'll just drink my bourbon.
Which is what I should be doing too. But yeah, the irony is the thing we're going up against is the mindset of the enterprise IT guys who've lived the last 10, 15, 20 years struggling through OS patches because their apps depended on it so much. And they just couldn't decouple their mindset with, hey, what do I do with my OS patches? I was having a conversation a week before on this topic, and I literally, halfway through this conversation, not even halfway, I'd say like very early on in the conversation, I just literally opened this link and I showed it to them and walked them through, I put a link in the Hangout, and I walked them through what we do for security and how we manage CVEs, the process that James was speaking of, and how Cloud Foundry is kind of very different in the way it handles a lot of these security issues that come out and how the patching and how that works. And they were like completely blown away. For them, they'd never seen that aspect of Cloud Foundry, and just the fact that we take care of this for them, number one, but more importantly, Cloud Foundry take care of this for them, in a completely automated fashion. They were like, enough said, is all they said. Right? They didn't care about any of the applications. The downside with the average enterprise is they have still a fair number of apps that have deep OS dependencies. You can't just decouple it, right? So I think for a little bit of time you will have those split environments where you have the legacy apps running on whatever platform they have. But 10-20% of the old apps, which would move to the new environment, and 100% of the new apps, which would stay on Cloud Foundry, is where the value really is. If anyone has not seen that link, you should take a look at the process and some of the instructions that go behind the CVE for Ghost, or some of the more recent ones are there. Once you read it, you'll be like, "That's it. That's all I got to do." It's a big mindset.
This is an interesting part of what we should put into the survey, right? So over the next 6 months, we're going to put about $500,000 into a 20-country survey to get attitudes and perceptions about Cloud Foundry from different users. One question that would be interesting to put in would be to say, what's the balance of your maintenance effort on the apps that are running on CF versus those that are, running on customized operating systems, direct dependencies, just so we can start to get people to think about that question and pull that data back to be able to report on it, because that should be one of the key components that people begin to become educated about and begin to expect from their next generation deployment.
I want to throw one caution out there to people, and actually I might even throw up a slide here to make this point explicit. Like just running containers in and of itself is not good enough. Like to do this, and for example, if you're running, I talked through the build pack process. And how we are marrying the container root file system with the output of that build pack. And the reason we were able to roll out that patch without touching people's applications is because we just replaced the container root file system, and that's something that the developer didn't bring in the first place. Since the platform was always responsible for that, that was something that we could replace, and and then the rolling deploy picks things up. So I'm going to pull up this depiction here, which is really important. Let me see where this is at. Here we go. So tell me if you guys are seeing this.
Yes.
So right here, like if
The
you
laugh
take
wasn't about your slide. It was about James's new nameplate.
right on. I'll have to check that out later. So if you bring the build pack, so the application developer just brought that top layer. I'm calling the application layer in this picture. And then Cloud Foundry is bringing both the runtime layer and the operating system, the root file system. And then we also ended up packing part there, the Aqua part at the very bottom. That's out the container with Ghost. So we kind of basically brought patches at two levels. If you do bring Docker images, which we do now support in Diego, you as a developer, you get a lot more power. So like Arnie was just saying, let's say I have an application-specific dependency on an operating system layer. If you bring your Docker image, you can customize the operating system image and bring just the version of glibc you want or other customizations. So that's a great powerful capability, but it's also a great big responsibility because now you're responsible for that layer. And when something like Ghost comes out, you're going to have to keep track of or have some way in your methodology, or if you don't, then it's just going to be chaos, of informing people and keeping track of which of your applications that were deployed that way have actually been patched. One of the things we talked about in the recently with Mike D'Alessio, who's the PM for the build packs, we had put a design doc out a while back for having the build packs express which version of Java, which Tomcat, which Ruby runtime version they got included with as part of your app. So then as an operator, you could ask a question like, hey, give me a list of all the apps that are running an insecure version of this runtime, and then get a report back and send a notification out to everybody that was running the insecure one, or actually even stop their apps, let's say. So that's where we want to get to at some point. But just wanted to call this out that just running in a container isn't enough. You have to kind of have this kind of like curated separation to get to all those benefits.
Hey Ben, what are your thoughts on this? Because I keep looking at those problems, and I recall a conversation I had with Anders Winberg, who was the technical fellow at Microsoft back in 2009 as he was trying to build out the future of Azure. He was like, this is a horrible problem, right? You end up with this order end problem that you can't reduce in complexity, and that's going to crush cloud computing. You have to redesign an operating system from the ground up to do this well. But you've got
one quick comment
than I do.
Yeah, I think this comes down to a question of hygiene in your processes. And I tweeted this before, but I think that a significantly advanced Docker build pipeline, starts to look indistinguishable from build packs. Or you're going to run into this problem where you have no idea what's going on. So,
yeah, so without digging into that, the really core concept here is that by being prescriptive, you don't merely make certain problems easier, you eliminate entire classes of problems, right? And that is across the board, right? We talked earlier about some of the operational advantages of that. And to a certain extent, what we're talking about here with patching is an operational concern. But where what you're patching is a serious security vulnerability, the agility actually really works in your favor in a way that's even more compelling than when you're trying to deploy a feature, right? Because it's usually the case that if you deploy a feature tomorrow versus today or next week versus today, it tends not to have a significant business impact. There are certain events that you may try and time things against that could influence that, but by and large, if you delayed shipping a feature by a week, no big deal. If there's a security vulnerability to which you are exposed and you wait a week, that week is you being exploited.
Yep.
And so there is serious customer impact to not patching those things in a timely fashion. And if your platform does not structure itself and require you to structure your applications and your processes such that doing those updates is trivial, as James was just describing, then to quote my favorite philosopher, you're going to have a bad time. And there's just no way around that, right? what you end up doing is essentially trying to rebuild a lot of Cloud Foundry in order to get all these advantages, right? That's what people have to understand is, could you do this on your own? Absolutely, of course you could, right? It's just software, right? And, if you want to pump, 48 person months into trying to reproduce some portion of it that isn't the whole thing because you want the special version that's only the pieces that you need, by all means, you can absolutely go do that. Meanwhile, you're going to have your ass handed to you by competitors who have said, forget that, we want to put all of our infrastructure, all of our resources into our business, our differentiation, the things that allow us to compete, right? The things that allow us to sell, the things that allow us to deliver services to our customers. Because Cloud Foundry is all the undifferentiated heavy lifting. If you don't understand that it's undifferentiated, then you need to investigate why it is, because it is. That is a fact. And the question you have to answer is why you don't think it is. Because there's something disconnect in your mindset that allows you to hold on to that. And whatever that may be, I'm not speculating, right? People have habits, people have different experiences, and so often the familiar stuff is what they want to hold on to. And in many ways, Cloud Foundry is, and this is part of what Arnie was saying, was that there's this mindset that you have to wrap your head around, and in many ways that's the hardest part of all of it, right? Getting Cloud Foundry, installing Cloud Foundry, deploying apps on Cloud Foundry, those are all straightforward mechanical tasks, but changing your way of thinking around how you deploy and operate your infrastructure and design and deploy your apps, that's hard.
That's exactly why I asked the simple why are you managing operating system question versus like the moonshot, app portability, scalability, awesome like other things you can do. It's because it gets at the mindset of are you still trying to do undifferentiated heavy lifting as a core part of what IT is doing. And once they have that moment of clarity, they're like, wow, I'm wasting my life worrying about multiple configurations of this app on different operating systems, and that means nothing to my customers.
Mm-hmm.
The fun begins.
I would actually go a step farther and say that I feel like some people are holding the whole industry back by supporting these old, crusty operating systems that allow people to keep dragging this out for literally decades.
Well, in terms of sheer revenue extraction, promoting legacy and encouraging people to remain with legacy is a pretty reliable business model, but it certainly isn't in the best interests of customers to do that.
I mean, the big challenge is it comes back to IT economics, right? How many dollars do you have per year? How many developers do you have available? How do you manage the balance of requests for new capability versus what you have to keep the lights on? 10 years ago, I was working with Merrill Lynch when I was at BEA Systems, and they had this most extraordinary fact, which is that they ran most of Merrill Lynch on CICS, right? CICS, which is basically a very complicated COBOL system running on IBM mainframes. And we were like, yeah, you should just kind of migrate all that over to Java. And they were like, son, that's nice. We run the business on 23,000 applications. And we were like, okay, we could see how this could be an issue, right? Just listing out the applications, determining what's available, what needs to be managed. By the way, you don't want to screw up the core transaction systems. Oh yeah, all these fixed income properties, the things that the bank actually generates revenue off of, they're on some undisclosed, undeterminable number of these CICS apps. So we fuck with legacy that's operating well at our own peril, and we definitely don't want to tell customers to risk their business.
So we're never going to. So obviously, we're never going to tell customers to go risk their business.
No, clearly not. I'm just saying. I've gained some respect for legacy over time.
Of course, legacy is a very pointy thing, and it will cut you at a moment's notice. But to your exact example, it's funny because. Just a few days ago, I was on the phone with a gargantuan financial institution discussing with them how they are already way down the path of building out a new transaction platform that will carry 100% of their transactions, because we're talking about their anti-money laundering system through which everything must pass. And this is what they're building it on. So totally hear you.
Mm-hmm.
And the distinction is around the mindset, right? They got it first. And there are absolutely going to be other financials that are going to lag behind because they can't wrap their head around this, right? But in terms of the taking the risk, these early adopters are certainly taking risks, and for folks adopting this early for things at that scale, we're going to have to work closely with them to develop some new technology to support it, and they're all about that. They recognize that's sort of part and parcel of trying to be this early in the system. But they are there, absolutely. So I'm very excited about watching folks like that really prove out what we've been saying the whole time, which is this allows you to compete better, this allows you to move faster, and ultimately this allows you to win as a business.
Right. To clarify, I don't advocate just trying to move everything to this brave new cloud-native world. I think you just have to balance your opportunity cost and where you're going to make investments and what the. I don't think people have, and this is actually the point you're kind of making earlier, Sam, is I don't think people understand how much it actually costs them to operate this way, this old legacy way. So if you're really measuring, you really understand what your financials look like, then I think it starts to be compelling to move into what we're trying to do here.
Well, there's two major collisions right in the Cloud Foundry environment where you're colliding with known quantities. One is we know how inefficient it is to run the operating systems and do all the manageability, but we know how to do it. Right? So you got kind of the comfort of the known known. And you got the other component, which is we develop apps really slowly, everybody's really busy, we kind of get there when we need to. And so really we're trying to help everybody jump into a completely new and better world, but it's over two twin set of hurdles. One is the operations part of IT shouldn't be the way that you think it is, right? It goes back to the, Inigo Montoya quote, IT, I do not think that word means what you think it means. The other one is agility, the idea of failing fast. In many of these cultures, the word fail is still a dirty word.
Yeah, I want to challenge the first part.
They're in a better place.
I want to challenge that first part. I totally agree with you on the second part. And I know of many anecdotes of just sort of hilariously wrong-headed executive responses to outages and errors, right? Like, hey, we understand that things go wrong, but if anything else goes wrong, you're all fired. Right? And that's actually almost a literal quote from one particular experience I know of. Thankfully, I was not involved with that. But in terms of people knowing what it costs them to do all that maintenance, I would say that they don't. And in many cases, the reason that it's hard to do this comparison is not because they're aware of it, but they're familiar with it, but rather that from their perspective, that cost is actually zero. Right? What we do today costs me nothing. And what you are asking me to do is both pay in some form of resource and take risk, right? I know that what I have today works. And the thing is, that is often false, right? Often it doesn't actually work for them. But they have convinced themselves that it does because they still have a job. And as long as they have a job, that stuff must be working.
This is the conversation I had at the one big bank. They said, we've gone to Agile, but now I have 100 or 200 project managers who have no idea what to do. And so they insert themselves into the process. Like this is a truly hard human evolution, like transition to industrialization question to solve. Like, how do you get the people who's not in their interest for it to be more efficient to like feel like they have a future? Like if we had that feature, I think we'd 5x our adoption because it's pure agency cost at some point.
The analogy I've been using is that you're trying to explain a sphere to the flatlanders, and all they can see is the circle.
That's right.
But you have to, so our opportunity then is to offer it in a way that is safe and inspiring, rather than sort of in your face and scary. So maybe this is a little bit too much of a humanistic perspective, but you think about these people, they're 10, 15, 20, 25 years in IT. Sometimes that whole stint's in the same company. We have almost a responsibility because we have something better. to help them figure out how to adopt it. So that's
How about-
something. That,
Yeah, that's the carrot approach,
You
right?
be the good cop. You be the good cop. And
No,
I'll
hold on. We don't need any cops. No cops, man.
Sorry.
No cops. So I totally agree with you, Sam. We need to be focusing on the carrot. And in fact, all we need to talk about is the carrot, because we can know with absolute certainty that reality will provide the stick. Right? And so we don't need to help it. And whether people come to that a year before we talk to them or a year after we talk to them doesn't change that, right? It changes the conversation that we have, because if they came to that understanding before they even talked to us, obviously the conversation is much more efficient, I'll say. And if we have to spend a year educating them, so be it. We have to spend a year educating them, right? Ultimately, as you say, we're working in their best interests. And very often, when you don't understand sort of the framework within which someone is operating, their working in your best interests may look like them hitting you with a stick, right? Right? Can I do another movie quote? Because now we're going to quote Jacob's Ladder, right?
Okay, go for it.
Which is, and I'm going to paraphrase to make it fit here, which is, when you're doing manual operations, it seems like you're going to see devils tearing your infrastructure apart. But when you deploy Cloud Foundry, you see that the devils are really angels. Right? And so that's really how it looks. It's all just perspective.
So one of the things that the team's done recently is the idea of minifying the Cloud Foundry environment, right? As a developer from the 80s and 90s, I always look at F5 Run as being sort of the golden days of development. So Lattice, being able to get your environment down on a laptop is pretty great. What would be the moral equivalent of that experience for the IT ops person to go, hey, I can take a taste of this. I don't have to buy the whole chicken dinner. Will they get that same experience from Lattice?
No, they probably something like
trying?
Microbosh, or we need to make. I think there's a bunch of usability and articulations. A little bit better documentation will make that barrier to entry lower for the ops side. And in some ways, Lattice isn't really the full Cloud Foundry, so it's some of the power of the scheduler, the routing, the health checks, and the log aggregation. But you don't have build packs. You don't have some of the other things that we were already talking about.
Yeah, I saw a tweet over the course of the week. Someone was doing some training on Bosch Lite, and they're like, "Holy cow! This thing was." I was able to demonstrate some of the things you're talking about, Andrew. Like, they killed some VMs and watched the resurrector just bring back the VMs. And in Bosch Lite, they just happened to be a container on a VM instead of an actual VM on IaaS. But we could certainly put together some kind of ops-focused series of like a workshop or something like that showed all of the operational benefits of Bosch that basically could run on a laptop. But yeah, I don't know if people have focused on that. I haven't seen one that's specifically focused on Bosch Lite. But then if you're going, that only is going to take you so far. Like what you could do is you could combine it, I suppose. You could deploy Lattice on Bosch Lite, and then you could show both, right? You could show the operator showing the VM kind of perspective of particular system components just disappearing and then getting resurrected. And then you could also show the same at the container level for end user applications for what happens for those.
Yeah, but I'd look at it slightly differently. I mean, yeah, Lattice for the dev makes a ton of sense because they don't have access to an environment. But we've done quite a few engagements where going from zero to Cloud Foundry as an operator has been like 3 hours. So if they can get all of Cloud Foundry and the value it offers in a few hours of their time, there's no need for any shortcuts. And we've done a bunch of engagements where we start by breakfast and by lunch the guy is like, wow, this is amazing. And it includes a fresh install.
No, there's a lot of stuff we do to walk people through stuff, but I think it's still a bit overwhelming for people to go to the open source, read the docs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that is a product plug, of course. There's a lot that OpsMan does that eases that pain, of course. But yeah, I've had an extremely positive reaction from almost everyone by lunchtime.
So this hasn't actually started as a project yet, but I think it's actually important work is to pull more and more of the Cloud Foundry services into standalone packages, and Lattice represents some of that. I would really like to see the next project be pulling the stagers apart into their own service that give you the build pack, standalone, and then it can emit containers, not just the containers that we would run, but also support for Docker and the active container stuff. And I think if you do that as a standalone service, that'll be a game changer as much as Lattice is.
Yeah, it's basically Cloud Rocker as a service, but standalone. You saw that stuff that Cloud Credo did, and just kind of taking that further.
So we had a couple of requests for topics people wanted to hear talked about tonight. You guys see those on the search handle? By the way, we've had a great outpouring of tweets tonight. People are quoting our tweets, quoting us on Twitter, which is getting very scary for After Dark, which used to be kind of more of a fun bowling alley kind of conversation.
We're also 70 minutes into this.
That's the perfect time to answer the people's questions, because if they're dedicated, they're still listening. You guys up for a couple of them?
Sure.
Yes, but first I have to carry on Ben Black's movie references for 200. We need to come up with how I learned to stop worrying and love the Cloud Foundry. Carry on.
You had me at Cloud Foundry. I'll just keep.
Dr. Cloud Love.
Oh, loving it. Okay, there we go, Dr. Cloud Love.
So I said something. I said two things this morning when I woke up. I said, "Hey, why are you managing operating systems?" And more controversially, I said, like, orchestration is the new assembly. Now, obviously, Cloud Foundry is an orchestration system. But this gets back to this Patrick Dubois tweet that we talked about on Cloud Foundry about 2 months ago, where he said, configuration management is the new assembly. And my point of it is that it's vital and you need it, but it's not like your average IT worker should be using it every day.
Well, they shouldn't be writing it.
We should be writing it every day. Like, it's inherent. Like, we're obviously using all kinds of assembler drivers to have the Skype conversation that if they were not done to perfection, we'd be in trouble. Mm-hmm. But did I go too far in that one? That was something that Jake Robinson, who helped write the zombie orchestration engine that powers vCloud Air with Nick Weaver. He was like, hey, you better talk about that tonight. Defend yourselves. So did I go too far, or do you guys agree?
No, I'll take the dangerous position of answering first. You didn't go too far. You didn't go far enough. Orchestration is a very generic sort of word, and Kubernetes is great at orchestration.
Just for future reference,
orchestration tools. There are orchestration tools from Hewlett-Packard. What keeps coming back about CF is the domain-specific orchestration to take care of application lifecycle. That is the fundamental differentiating point of view for CF is app centricity.
Yep.
And being able to design all the things that we're doing around that. So, assembler is assembler because it talks to the machine. But when you're starting to deal with domain-specific constructs, you're stepping up above that. So I don't think that your bourbon tastings as a service, comments are that far off.
All right, I believed it, and it was a popular in the retweet, but I think it hurt the feelings of people who have written some orchestration systems they're very proud of. And that
you have to do things in general purpose languages before you come up with the DSL, right? I mean, it's a matter of experience, right? It's like you can't start with here's my entire hierarchy. You have to start with your base class and come up with a couple of subclasses and go, oh, okay, now we need to work it out. I think Ben had a comment. No, Ben didn't have a comment.
Did I? Oh, I was just going to say that. Continuing our quotes, that you need to quote The Simpsons and say that you didn't go too far enough.
We
just have to be careful about the ontology, right? It's the design of language that makes us intelligent or unintelligent, and the more that we just use sort of vanilla term orchestration, the more that we're letting in a lot of divergent concepts that aren't actually helpful. So let's be thoughtful about the domain specificity of orchestration. Lots of good ways to orchestrate things. What we care about here is orchestrating the app lifecycle, and nobody's really put in the quantity of thought into app lifecycle orchestration management as CF has.
All right, Jake Robinson, you got your answer. Sam rounds you through heat. Hope you can handle it. Anyone else want in after that? Sam went first, and I think last. Like, who wants to drop ontology on somebody's head? Anyone else? Nobody else. Cloud Foundry, Cax, at Cax asks, you should talk about how CF's supporting data, platforms, tools, etc. I know, Arnie, this is something you're working on daily. Do you want to talk a little bit about CF and data? And Ben,
you kind of mentioned it in passing earlier when we were talking about the notion of portability and being able to do those data things. So.
But is supporting data services something that's important to us? And is there? I mean, I already mentioned it a little bit, but
well, in case you didn't know, Pivotal actually does some stuff with data, and we thought a lot about how this should work. And you can talk all you want about apps, but without data, there's no app. So you better solve that problem too.
Yeah, and the shape of data is changing so much. The needs of data, even within the enterprise, are getting to be so demanding. It's amazing. Every week is a conversation, and I listen to use cases. I'm like, it's still a lot of the same old stuff, but the applications, the way in which they want to use it. And as we see a lot of enterprises start to look at microservices, obviously the data models and the variety of data services needed to support the microservices are so different, and that's putting the pressure on senior app architects on, hey, I need a robust set of services that can support these applications. For some of them it could be plain old SQL, some of them it could be NoSQL, some of them it could be low latency NoSQL. Majority of the data services, they expect them to be distributed. You don't want to be stuck with, Ben says, the 3 cups. The reliability stops at 3, like from some vendors that we all know. As Ben and I have been spending a ton of time on IoT, and IoT is this classic blend of data coming in really fast, data coming in really big, and then applications running on top of it. Just right there, you have data demands that are across the board. So we've been spending a ton of time looking at the list of data services and being fairly opinionated in the list of services that we get in Cloud Foundry. Some of them are ours. Some of them are obviously driven by the ecosystem. And I think 2015 is going to be, I don't want to invoke my inner bomber when I shout services, but there's no question that data services and CF are going to be extremely key, and you'll see more come from us for sure, and the ecosystem of Cloud Foundry.
I think for lobbing a tweet at us, that's a pretty good answer, and I know that we're very focused. Like that one high throughput use case Ben talked about requires us perfecting our existing Kafka service for Cloud Foundry, which is, it's not a data service per se, but it is definitely a very unique breed of messaging service in a sense.
Queues are databases.
I would say that especially for Kafka, its infrastructure needs are kind of indistinguishable from a database.
Right.
All queues are databases.
Yeah, so I think good answer there. Someone else, Patricia, who is almost creepily a stalker of Cloud Foundry After Dark. I got to give Patricia the Stalker of the Week award. She also tweeted, "Be right back. I think I left Fake Waters James tied up." I think that has to be the first tweet I've ever read that involved myself for Cloud Foundry. But Patricia,
does After Dark mean something I don't think it does here? Because I'm getting a little nervous.
I mean, Patricia's a great supporter of us, and she asked to hear more about the CF Summit in Santa Clara, which I think Sam talked about, May 11th and 12th. But Patricia, I got to admit, here on After Dark, it's secret time. I was a little creeped out by "Be Right Back," left Fake Water James tied up.
Hey, but the call for proposals is open for the summit.
Yeah, the CFP is open. The summit's going to be awesome. We're going to have a blast. I don't want to kind of sneak out the nerd culture speakers we have, but a couple of high-profile science fiction authors.
So we drop secrets on After Dark sometimes.
Do we?
It's kind of a
But only accidentally on
Watch
purpose.
90 minutes in.
I think we'll do this as a teaser campaign. I just said we have two very high-profile science fiction authors who are going to be giving talks, and one of the great women scientists speakers who's got a background in building heavy engineering projects as well. Also, maybe this is a better teaser. Also, the author of Physics for Rock Stars. So that should be good. But lots of customer-centric, application-centric, real-world stuff. We'll have looks like we'll have an industrial internet exhibit. Regardless of what you may think of the Santa Clara Convention Center, we are absolutely going to make it awesome. We'll have good food, a lot of smart people, and then we've got some access to Levi Stadium right across the street. So we'll be doing some cool stuff, and hopefully we will get a ton of attendance and participation. But definitely put in your CFP.
That's huge. How exciting is it to have Sam cooking up all this stuff full time, guys? That's kind of crazy.
It's the best job I ever had, man.
There was no better choice. It was Sam.
There was no better choice.
Now I'm going to do the Wayne's World thing. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy.
It's huge.
You guys are like Alice Cooper.
I do not know how to take that.
I think he said we're old. Did you just say we're old?
Sort of like old, never quite a hit, irrelevant, but interesting. Yeah, I think that's it. Idea, Shafe. Any parting wisdom?
I think we had a good run. That was I thought that was quite a wander through a bunch of meaty topics. So hopefully the people at home enjoyed it. Till next time.
This is a blast.
How's your bourbon?
It makes me uniquely appreciate the intellectual caliber that we've assembled on this little brute squad. So
we're not done. We added one more, but we can't talk about it yet.
Bro, that's a secret, and California employment law is still up in the air. That guy's so good that Ben just lost it. We're hiring some really good people. That's all I'll say.
We're not done yet.
And their former employees are not always excited that everyone wants to come and work on Cloud Foundry, but we are not apologetic that great talent wants to hang out with us, and we will continue to try to embody that in everything we do. So, peace out.
Can I quote Andrew Schaefer on this? We're going to need a bigger boat.
We are definitely going to need a bigger boat.
All right, I think we'll call it After Dark. It's a wrap.